The clink of a fork on porcelain, the low hum of the fridge, the quiet, barely there tapping of Jacob's sneaker against the table leg. It was the kind of evening where the silence isn't awkward, it's routine, predictable, muted. Grace sat at the far end of the dinner table staring at the soft steam curling off the plate in front of her. Leftover chicken, reheated potatoes, a few green beans she sautéed out of guilt more than hunger. Thomas didn't comment. He never did anymore. He sat across from her, scrolling absently through his phone, his face illuminated by the cold glow of the screen, not once looking up. He chewed mechanically. Cut, lift, chew, scroll, repeat. There were no compliments, no conversation, not even eye contact. 15 years together, and somehow they had slipped into this pattern, this polite, quiet performance of family dinner. Jacob, seated between them, said nothing either. He wore his hoodie up, indoors headphones hanging loose around his neck. One hand hovered near his phone, the other slowly tearing a piece of bread he didn't eat. They were a family of three, sharing a table, sharing a meal, but not sharing the moment. And yet Grace didn't speak. Because what would she say, Thomas? Why don't you ever look at me anymore? Jacob, do you even realize we're here? Or worse, do either of you notice how lonely I feel sitting right in front of you? Instead, she offered a tired smile when Jacob glanced up. A reflex. Motherhood, after all, is sometimes more about holding your silence than raising your voice. She poured herself a glass of water. Her hands trembled slightly, but not enough for anyone to notice. She had gotten good at hiding that part. Tonight felt heavier. There was something in the air that she couldn't name, a pressure building in the cracks of routine, a feeling that something irreversible was coming. And she was right. She was mid-pour. The water stream from the glass pitcher caught the light a smooth arc into her cup. The moment was quiet, controlled, normal, until he spoke. Thomas didn't even lift his eyes. He didn't raise his voice. No drama, no warning, just calm, detached words like he was commenting on the weather. I think we should get a DNA test for Jacob. The sound of the water overflowed, spilling over the edge of her cup, splashing onto the table. Grace froze, her hands still holding the pitcher, midair. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. Her brain scrambled to catch up, repeating the sentence in her head, like an echo she couldn't chase away. A DNA test for Jacob, the boy who had his father's dimples, her smile, their shared memories tucked into every drawer of this house. She slowly set the pitcher down. It trembled slightly as it touched the table. Thomas still hadn't looked at her. His eyes were back on his phone like nothing happened. Grace's voice came out thin, unsure. Is this some kind of joke? But there was no smirk, no laughter, no apology. Just silence. Sharp, heavy, final. And in that silence, something inside Grace began to crack. Grace let out a soft laugh. It was the kind of laugh people use to soften tension, thin, brittle, trying too hard. You're joking, right? Her voice cracked at the end, but Thomas didn't blink, didn't look up, didn't move. That silence, it wasn't confusion, it wasn't hesitation, it was confirmation. No, he wasn't joking, not even close. His fingers kept scrolling the screen, news articles, sports stats, or maybe nothing at all. He looked calm, too calm, like someone who had been rehearsing this for days. Grace felt the room grow smaller, the air thicker. She tried again, this time her tone was sharper, colder. You're serious? Still no eye contact. Thomas finally sighed, folded his phone, set it down gently beside his plate, and then without emotion, I just need to know. That was it. 4 words that shattered 15 years of motherhood. I just need to know. As if all their memories could be filed away under suspicion, as if Jacob was suddenly a question mark. Grace didn't answer. She couldn't. Her heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear herself think. She stood slowly, gathering plates, anything to distract herself from the sound of her husband undoing their entire life with one sentence. They finished dinner in silence. Jacob didn't notice. He cracked a joke about school. Neither parent laughed, and he went upstairs humming some song under his breath, unaware the ground beneath his family was shifting. That night, Grace didn't sleep. She lay beside Thomas, who fell asleep within minutes, peacefully, effortlessly, as if nothing had happened. She stared at the ceiling fan above them, watching it turn. 1 blade, 2 blades, 3, round and round, each rotation slicing through her thoughts. What if he knows something what if he's right? What if I've lost everything and I don't even know it yet? She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stayed awake, paralyzed by a fear she couldn't name because naming it would make it real. The house didn't break all at once. It unraveled quietly, painfully, piece by piece. Thomas started waking up before sunrise. No goodbye, no kiss. Just the sound of the garage door at 5:42 a.m. and the quiet engine of a man escaping his own home. He came home late, too late for dinner, too late for how was your day, too late for fatherhood. He slipped in through the door like a ghost, silent, distant, untouchable. And Jacob noticed. One evening, while pushing peas around his plate, his voice barely a whisper, he looked up at Grace and asked, "Mom, is Dad mad at me?" The question pierced straight through her. She had rehearsed 100 answers for herself, but not one for him. She tried to smile, the kind of smile you give when your heart is in your throat. "No, sweetheart," she said gently. "Dad's just tired. Work's been hard lately." A lie, sharp and bitter on her tongue. But what else could she say? That his father didn't trust him, that he was treating him like a stranger? No, some truths are too cruel for a child's heart. They sat side by side, 3 people, 1 bench, 3 completely different worlds. Thomas sat stiffly, arms crossed, legs locked. He stared ahead at the neutral beige wall as if willing himself to disappear into it. When the clipboard came, he didn't hesitate. He took the pen, signed his name with the sharpness of someone checking a box. Like this was paperwork for a mortgage renewal, not a paternity test. Grace's hands shook as she held the pen. Not from guilt, from fear, from humiliation. From the quiet scream inside her head that no one could hear. She tried to steady her breathing. The nurse stood there, smiling politely, too politely, as if she didn't notice the thick tension clinging to their bodies like fog. Jacob sat between them, swinging his legs, clueless, innocent, a kid on a regular Tuesday morning. He looked around the clinic and asked casually, "Is this like a checkup or something?" Grace smiled a smile so fragile it could have cracked under a whisper. "Yes, baby. Just routine tests." Another lie, another stitch in the fabric of silence she was using to keep her family from ripping apart. She didn't look at Thomas, and he didn't look at her. They were strangers now, bound only by paperwork and the boy sitting between them who deserved better than both of their silence. The doctor didn't look up right away. He flipped through the file, slowly, each page turned louder than it should have been, like a countdown. Grace's palms were damp against her skirt. Thomas leaned forward, elbows on his knees, like he already knew what was coming. Then the doctor cleared his throat and said it calmly, clinically, like it was just another test result. "According to the DNA analysis, Thomas, you are not Jacob's biological father." Silence. For a moment, no one breathed. Even the ticking wall clock seemed to pause. Then, bang! Thomas's fist slammed into the desk. The doctor jumped. Grace flinched. "I knew it," Thomas growled, eyes wild. "I told you something wasn't right." He stood up, pacing, hands in his hair, his voice sharp, slicing through the room. 15 years. 15 years I raised that boy." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't look at Grace. Grace sat frozen, her fingers clenched together, white at the knuckles. She felt the world tilt beneath her. Everything blurry. Everything wrong. Jacob, her Jacob, the baby they brought home from the hospital. His dimples, his laugh, his little hand that once wrapped around her finger. Now suddenly called into question, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. Her throat was too tight, her heart too loud. She thought this was the worst it could get. She was wrong. Grace thought she had fallen as far as pain could take her, but what waited just beneath this heartbreak was something darker than she ever imagined. The doctor hesitated just for a second, and that second lasted forever. His eyes shifted from the folder to Grace. Then in a slow, careful voice, "Jacob is not your biological child either." "Mrs. Caldwell." The room went still. Not just quiet, dead. Grace didn't breathe, couldn't. Her lungs locked in place as if her body knew it couldn't handle the weight of that sentence. She stared at the doctor, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to say he was wrong, that he'd read the wrong chart, that this was some cruel mistake. But he didn't take it back. Instead, he added softly, "We ran the test 3 times. The results are conclusive." Grace blinked, but her vision stayed blurred. Her fingers gripped the edge of the chair. The world, the very definition of her life, was crumbling in real time. She wasn't Jacob's mother. How could that be? She had carried him, bled for him, screamed his name through tears when he had night terrors, stayed awake when he was sick, watched him sleep, watched him grow, loved him in ways only a mother could. And yet a piece of paper was telling her it wasn't real, that it never was. She felt cold, not the kind of cold from outside, but the kind that starts deep in your chest and spreads outward. Thomas didn't say anything, didn't even look at her. He leaned back, arms crossed, jaw tight, as if this was her fault, as if the pain was his alone to claim. Grace wanted to speak, to scream, to fight, but she couldn't even remember how to breathe. She didn't go to bed that night. She couldn't. Her body was on autopilot, but her mind was spinning in 100 directions. Grace walked slowly into the closet. She reached for the top shelf, dust clinging to her fingers, as she pulled down a worn gray shoebox. Inside it, her life, or what she thought was her life. Jacob's first hospital photo, crinkled, faded, but his face still so clear. Swaddled in the blue striped blanket, eyes shut a tiny fist near his cheek. Next, his hospital bracelet, the one she never threw away. Still had his name, still had the date, still had meaning, or so she thought. Then the birth certificate, her name, Thomas's name, Jacob's name, all printed neatly, all meaningless now. She flipped through more papers, baby cards, footprints, a lock of hair, all proof of a bond that now felt like a lie. And then she saw it, a photo she hadn't paid attention to in years. She was in a hospital bed, pale and exhausted, her arms cradling Jacob. Thomas sat beside her, eyes swollen from crying. But what made her freeze was not the baby, not Thomas, not even herself. It was the background. Standing just behind her shoulder, barely in frame, was a nurse. Young, blonde, her badge was crooked, her eyes wide, startled, not smiling, not posing, just caught. And in that frozen expression was something Grace couldn't ignore: guilt. Her breath caught. She leaned in closer. Who was she? Why did she look so wrong, so afraid? Grace's fingers trembled as she clutched the photo. She didn't know it yet, but that face, that single photo, was about to unlock everything. Grace sat frozen, her fingers tightening around the photo. The woman in the background wasn't just any nurse. Her face looked nervous, almost haunted, like she knew a secret she'd been carrying for years. The name tag was partially obscured. But one thing was clear: Natalie Brooks. Grace repeated it under her breath. Once, twice. It felt foreign, heavy. She opened her laptop and typed the name into every search bar she could find. Nothing solid, a few LinkedIn profiles, a couple of old mentions in medical journals. But then one hit, a community newsletter from 15 years ago. Natalie Brooks commended for heroic action during hospital evacuation. Same hospital, same maternity ward, same week Jacob was born. This wasn't a coincidence. Grace whispered to herself. You know something, don't you? Her pulse quickened. She wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a mother on a mission. If Jacob isn't my son, Grace thought, then somewhere out there my real child is living another life, with strangers. The bell above the flower shop door jingled softly as Grace stepped inside. The warm scent of lilies and eucalyptus hung in the air. Behind the counter, a woman was arranging white orchids. She looked up and froze. Her face went pale. The same haunted eyes from the photo. Natalie Brooks, Grace asked, voice barely above a whisper. The woman didn't respond right away. She stared almost as if she were seeing a ghost. After a long silence, Natalie said, I knew you'd come one day. Her voice trembled. I was just a trainee, a rookie nurse. That day was a nightmare. Grace stepped closer. What happened? Natalie's hands shook. One petal dropped from the bouquet she held. I'm not sure how much I should say, but something went wrong that day. I've tried to forget, but it's haunted me every single night. Grace's voice was steady. I don't want revenge. I want the truth. Natalie looked down. Then you'd better sit down, because the truth is worse than you think. Natalie sat down on the flower shop stool, her eyes wet, her hands trembling. That day, there were 2 deliveries, both emergency cesareans. 2 baby boys born within minutes of each other. One was yours. One belonged to a young mother who was unconscious for hours. Grace stood frozen, her breath shallow. I was new, tired, overwhelmed. I mixed up the identification tags. When the nurses double-checked, I thought I fixed it. She swallowed hard. But I didn't. I gave your son to someone else and handed you someone else's child. Grace fell to her knees. The pain tore through her like glass. No, 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 Natalie's voice cracked. You raised him, loved him. You didn't know. None of us did. But it was me. I made that mistake, and I never had the courage to tell. Grace looked up, tears falling. Where is my real son? Natalie whispered, almost inaudible. I think I can find him. Natalie's voice trembled, her eyes distant, as if pulling a name from the depths of memory. I remember her fiery red hair freckles. Her face was full of fear and love all at once. Grace waited, barely breathing. Her name was Monica. Monica Reed. Natalie scribbled an address onto a crumpled receipt. She lived in the south end of Brookhaven. I don't know if she's still there, but that's where she was when she gave birth. Grace stared at the paper, her fingers trembling. She whispered, Monica Reed. Natalie looked up, shame flooding her face. I'm so sorry, Grace. But Grace was already turning toward the door. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just moved like a mother who just learned a piece of her soul was living in someone else's home. She got into her car, started the engine. It was already dark. The streetlights flickered. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. Her heartbeat pounded like a drum inside her chest. She whispered to herself, my son, my real son, Grace, clutched Monica's address and drove into the night, heart thundering. Each mile a question, what would she find on the other side of that door? Grace stood frozen as the door creaked open. There she was, Monica Reed. Red hair tied in a messy bun, eyes sharp but tired. A woman who had clearly seen things, lost things. And yet there was something about her, something familiar and maternal that pierced through Grace like lightning. Can I help you? Monica asked cautiously, her hand still on the doorknob. Grace opened her mouth, but no words came out. Then from behind Monica, a young voice called out. Mom, a boy appeared. Maybe 9, maybe 10. But Grace knew. Before her brain could catch up, her heart screamed the truth. The boy's face, it was Thomas. The chin, the eyes, the posture. It was like looking at a faded memory come to life. Monica turned and smiled softly. Ryan, it's okay. Go back to your book, sweetie. But Grace whispered, barely audible. His name is Ryan. Monica blinked. Yes, Ryan. Grace's knees buckled slightly, but she grabbed the railing to steady herself. Everything was suddenly real. Not a theory, not a nightmare. Real. Flesh and blood. Her flesh. Her blood. And he was calling another woman Mom. Monica's face shifted. Something in Grace's expression had struck her. Are you all right? Grace opened her mouth again, but all that escaped was a breathless, I think I'm his mother. Monica's face paled. Grace stared at Ryan. 2 mothers, 1 child, and the truth no one was prepared for. Monica's face twisted with a painful recognition. She didn't look surprised, more like affirmed. I've wondered, she admitted quietly, eyes drifting to the hallway where Ryan had disappeared. His blood type, it doesn't match mine, or my husband's. The doctors brushed it off as a rare mutation. But she clenched her jaw. A mother knows. Grace nodded, her voice trembling. Jacob. He doesn't look like me. Or Thomas. And last week we found out. She took a breath. Neither of us are biologically related to him. Monica sat down slowly, like her legs couldn't hold the weight of the moment. Grace continued. I think they were switched. Our sons. That day. At the hospital. Monica buried her face in her hands. Jesus. The air between them hung thick with grief, rage, and something else, hope, terrifying and fragile. Monica slowly raised her eyes. What do we do now? Grace replied. We find the truth. Together. The envelope trembled in Grace's hands as she unfolded the paper. Ryan Reed, biological son of Grace Williams and Thomas Williams. Jacob Williams, biological son of Monica Reed and Daniel Reed. Silence. Deafening silence. Monica sank to her knees. Ryan, he's yours. Grace couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Her baby, her flesh and blood, raised by another woman for 12 years. She looked at Jacob's photo on her lock screen. No, he's mine too. He called me Mom. He held my hand when he was scared. He loves peanut butter cookies like I do. Tears streamed down both women's faces, not out of anger at each other, but from the devastating truth that neither of them could undo what had been done. Grace collapsed onto the couch, whispering to herself, I've already lost 1 son. I won't lose the other. I can't. While searching for an old photo album, Grace stumbled upon an envelope tucked deep in Thomas' drawer. She opened it expecting memories, but instead found hotel receipts, restaurant bills, and flower orders. Names she didn't recognize. Dates that lined up with nights he'd come home late from work. A red lipstick kiss on a napkin, not her shade. Grace sat down shaking. It wasn't just once. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a choice, again and again, in the cruelest part. While she was raising a child that wasn't biologically hers, he was out building lies, dinner by dinner, bouquet by bouquet. Her world already cracked from the DNA test, now splintered into betrayal. Grace waited. She waited until the silence in the house roared louder than any scream. Until the dinner went cold. Until Jacob fell asleep clutching his stuffed dinosaur. Then she walked to the bedroom, eyes blazing. Thomas was texting, smiling. She snatched the phone, saw the name Vivian, and that was it. Slap. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "You questioned my loyalty," she said, voice trembling but sharp. "You cheated, humiliated me, abandoned your son, then dare to say, 'It's nothing.'" Thomas froze stunned, but only for a moment. Without a word, he grabbed his jacket and walked out. Just like that, Grace stood in the doorway, heart pounding. 3 days later, a plain envelope arrived. Inside, the divorce papers. No note, no apology, just silence, and finally clarity. Grace looked at the divorce papers. Her hand trembled, not from fear, but from release. She signed her name. No tears, no second guessing. Just a whisper to herself. "You walked away, Thomas, but I will stand. I will fight for Jacob and for the truth." She boxed up the past, the wedding album, the matching mugs, the lies, and donated it all. A new fire ignited in her. Grace met with a lawyer the next morning. They would file a lawsuit against the hospital. Negligence, trauma, a lifetime of damage. But even as she stood tall, even as the lawyer nodded with confidence, she couldn't shake the dread in her chest. Because deep down, Grace knew the courtroom wouldn't be the hardest battle. The hardest part was yet to come, when a child she raised might ask to go home. The sky was overcast, the air still. A quiet tension hung over the small park, like fog clinging to forgotten memories. Grace arrived first. Jacob clung to her side, confused, quiet, older than his 11 years. Moments later, Monica stepped into view, and beside her, Ryan, red-haired, cautious, with eyes that searched the scene like it was a puzzle. 2 boys, 2 mothers, 2 lives that had unraveled, now converging. Jacob stared at Ryan, then at Grace. His voice cracked through the silence. "So who am I if I was never really yours? Do I even belong to anyone?" Grace's eyes filled. But she didn't blink. She now looked him in the eyes. "You're mine, Jacob. Not because of blood, not because of DNA, but because I held you when you cried. I packed your lunches. I told you bedtime stories. I fought for you, and I always will." Jacob blinked. His lip quivered. "But if Ryan is her son and I'm hers, then does that mean I'm not supposed to be with you?" Grace's voice steadied. "You are exactly where you're meant to be. Biology doesn't make a family. Love does. And you've had mine from your very first breath." Ryan looked down at his sneakers, then up at Monica. Monica whispered, "It's okay, baby. This doesn't change how much I love you." And for a moment, just a moment, time held still. 2 boys, 2 mothers, 1 broken truth. And a bond that no courtroom, no hospital, no blood test could ever fully define. The first few minutes were unbearable. Jacob sat on the park bench, arms crossed, jaw-clenched, eyes locked onto the dirt beneath his shoes. Ryan stood a few feet away, awkwardly kicking a deflated soccer ball. He glanced over, then back down. Monica and Grace stood at a distance, watching, waiting, hoping. "He hates me," Ryan whispered to no one. "He's hurt," Grace murmured quietly. "But that doesn't mean hell stay that way." Silence stretched, then a shift. Jacob sighed long and heavy, then stood. He didn't say a word, just walked toward the ball, stopped, nudged it with his toe. Ryan looked up. No words, just a quiet moment. Tension still lingering, but something warmer rising beneath it. Jacob nudged the ball. Ryan caught it and kicked it back. Then again, and again, a rhythm emerged. Still no words, but the silence was no longer heavy. It was filled with something new, something soft. Forgiveness wasn't spoken, but it was passed between them like the ball rolling gently in the grass. Grace exhaled. Monica wiped away a tear. 2 boys, born from different wombs, raised by different hearts, and yet both craving the same thing, belonging. Grace sat on the porch, hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, the steam rising like the breath she'd finally let go. In the yard, Jacob and Ryan chased a soccer ball, their laughter echoing off the fence, rising above the noise of what had been betrayal lies heartbreak. Now only the present, only the sound of two boys discovering something precious, not just each other, but pieces of themselves. Monica sat beside her, silent at first. Then softly, they're stronger than we were at their age. Grace nodded, and kinder. She didn't speak of Thomas. Not anymore. His absence was no longer a wound, just an empty space she no longer tried to fill. She had lost a marriage. But she didn't lose her son, and she didn't lose herself. No lawsuit could undo the past, but maybe, just maybe, truth and love could shape the future. As the sun dipped low behind the trees, Ryan passed the ball. Jacob caught it and smiled, not with his mouth, but with his whole face. Grace watched them, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel broken. She felt home. Sometimes the deepest wounds aren't the ones that we see, they're the ones no one else can. Grace lost almost everything: her marriage, her trust, even her biological child. But what she didn't lose was far more powerful: her courage, her love, herself. Because being a mother, it's not just DNA. It's not a birth certificate. It's showing up every day. Loving a child like your own, even when the world says he isn't. This story reminds us family is not always blood. Truth can be painful, but it sets us free. And strength doesn't mean you don't cry, it means you keep going, even when you do. Grace didn't come out unscarred, but she came out stronger, wiser, and more herself than ever before. And maybe so can you. If this story moved you, if you believe truth, love, and second chances matter, subscribe to Through Her Eyes. Because here, every story is a window into strength. Every voice matters. And sometimes hearing someone else's truth helps you find the courage to face your own. You're not alone, and your story deserves to be heard.